Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live. Got a great show for you today. We are doing, as usual, every Tuesday, doing pitch deck deep dives. I'm joined by our venerable CEO, Will Schroter, and I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. I see some people popping in, and they're checking us out. If you are watching online right now, just want to say that you can type in a question into our Q&A box at any moment in time or right now. Even if you have a burning question, you came here and you said, I need to ask this question, type it in right now and we will prioritize and get to it. Or if our discussion sparks your questions and you have this flash of ingenious inspiration to say, I got a question I think everybody's going to want to listen to, we are happy to answer them. If you're watching this on a recording and you have questions, leave a comment and we will try to cover them in a future episode. As I said, I'm joined by our CEO and founder of Startups.com, Dr. Will Schroter. He is the pitch deck doctor. This is going to be super exciting. Will, how about you introduce yourself to everyone? Give everyone a little thumbnail about who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, sure. Hey, guys, I'm Will Schroter. I'm the founder, CEO of Startups.com. As my man Ed said, I've been doing this forever. This is my 31st year of being a startup across 9 different startups. This is all I've ever done for a very long time. I've had the pleasure of reviewing thousands and thousands and thousands of pitch decks and getting into this process backward and forward and building, tons of my own pitch decks. And all I've done, for decades and decades is worked with founders and dug into these things. And, pitch decks, they're hard. They're hard. It's so funny because we trivialize them. We look at a pitch deck and here's what we say. We say it's 10 to 12 slides. How hard can it be? It's a couple sentences per slide, right?
Famous
How hard
last
can
words.
it be? I'll knock this out in a week. How hard can it be? It is easily one of the hardest documents you will ever write. I'll go so far as to say it may be the hardest 1 or 2 sentences that you'll ever write. And so what we do, what Ed and I do, what we do at Startups.com, is we take something that looks so easy. We show you why you're pulling your hair out and we make it less complex again. We break it down, we distill it, we make it back to child's play, and we turn it into Mad Libs. We show you sentence by sentence exactly how you're supposed to do it and take your words, get them out of your head and put them in the simplest terms possible. That's part of what we'll do today is we'll distill this really complex thing into the simplest words possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Will, you are hired as a co-host for all this.
Thank you.
Before we continue, just want to mention that this wonderful episode of Startups.com Live is brought to you by us at Startups.com. Something you want to check out is this podcast called Startup Therapy. I am very, very big on this podcast because it's the reason I joined this community after listening to it. This is where Will and our colleague, Chief Marketing Officer Ryan Rattan at Startups.com sit around and they have a no BS conversation about startups, startup life, all the things that go into startups, like this topic here, how we secretly lose control of our startups. Secretly, a lot of people don't like to talk about this stuff, but Will and Ryan, they get right into it. I highly suggest you check it out, especially if you're part of the Startups.com community. Take a look at the other little titles that we've got, and you see they get right into it. Will, let's give it a thumbnail and get everybody interested. How do we secretly lose control of our startups? What can they expect checking out this episode?
I love when we talk about this stuff. I also love when you scroll through that and it makes me realize that I have exactly one look. I'm like Derek Zoolander. Black V-neck. That's it. That's all I've got. I've got one look. Anyway, but on that episode, all of this is kind of just stuff where I'm sitting down with founders and we go through like these really gnarly, like kind of very personal topics, and I sit back and I think a lot about it. And I write about it. And this one was founder, one of the things we talk about a lot where founders will say, work with investors. They want to take control of my startup. And I'm like, you're going to lose control of your startup in ways you're not even realizing. And like, well, what do you mean? I was like, you're thinking your biggest concern is that you're going to lose control because you're going to give up 51%. That's what everybody thinks about, right? I'm going to give up 51% and I'm going to lose control of my startup. I'm like, that's the least of your concerns. I was like, have you taken on a co-founder? Like, oh yeah, it's been fantastic. I found a co-founder, just lost control. I was like, the control you thought you had, you just gave it up because you just took on a co-founder, right? Now you no longer have control. Somebody else controls 50% of your decisions. Oh, well, I didn't think about that. You have a major customer? Yeah. Yep. Just lost control. Guess what? They now choose what you get to do. You have 5 direct reports, vice presidents that you created. Guess what? They now have control of the major decisions within your company. You've given up control in so many different ways. The least of your concern is the fact that you took on an investor, and people just don't see it. We did a whole episode on how that manifests over time. It's fascinating. Would love for you guys to check it out.
All right, you heard it here. Check out the Startup Therapy podcast episode Once again, just a reminder, we're going to jump into these pitch decks. Type in your questions into the Q&A box. You can ask anything. You can ask what I ate for breakfast. You can ask what color my wallpaper is. We are totally open books. We are here to answer your questions. All right, Will, so let me set this up on how it works with these pitch decks. We have founders across the interwebs contact us because we're putting out all this material online, and they say, can you please review our pitch deck? And we say, okay, great. Let's make some content out of it. I've kind of created a little niche corner for myself on YouTube with that. And so we're getting everybody in on the party. Wanted to say, for the founders out there that send us their pitch decks and you get this type of review, you run the gauntlet, my respect to you completely. It takes tremendous amounts of courage. You would rather get it right between the eyes and get feedback from us than have to send it to an investor, bomb in front of an investor, and go through all the psychological pain and damage. Will, you give feedback on pitch decks. What have you seen in terms of founders getting that feedback when they come to one of your workshops? You do Pitch Deck Doctor Live. Yeah. What happens there and what's the benefit?
Well, here, first things first, like one of our hallmarks of when we give feedback, we're not here to offend you. Like I derive no pleasure of giving you feedback and making you upset. And that doesn't mean I'm soft pedaling it. I think it's a weak move where like an investor comes and they're like, let me tell you how smart I am by belittling you about your idea. Honestly, I think that's soft, right? Like my family and I, we were watching Shark Tank the other night, and the sharks are like, digging into the person about how dumb their idea is. I was like, that's easy. Right? Telling somebody that their idea is dumb is easy. The hard part is fixing it. The hard part is saying, here's how to make it better, right? So my job, Ed, your job when we're talking to founders is, hey, here's somewhere where the pitch deck looks maybe weak or maybe something's broken. Here's how to fix it. So when I'm giving feedback, it's here's how to make it better, not here's what's broken. Anybody can do that. So when we're talking to founders and we're saying, hey, here's the problem statement. This is exactly what we're about to do. So you're about to see it, firsthand. We're saying, hey, here's something broken in the problem statement, and here's how I would fix it.
Yes.
If I don't know how to fix it, then shut up. I don't need the feedback, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing.
That's right. You have to understand, and I like to say this to founders, my incentive is to make you successful because that makes me look good. This is not one of those videos where you have some rich guy tear down pitch decks and do this pitch deck roast just because. Yeah. No, we want to make you look good. And this is what we want to really, really impress upon all you founders out there is that talking about this is developing a soft heart and thick skin. If you can have this conversation with people like me and Will, who've been around, we've seen it. And, we'll ask maybe Will just a few questions about his experience as we go along here. But I think he's been to the Mount Rushmore of pitching VC. He's going to be able to share with you, and you're going to be able to vicariously learn from him and siphon it off, go and, drink his milkshake, if you will, and then learn how to stand in front of investors and take it because it's rough out there. Let's jump into the first one. Well, I have not, full disclosure, for everybody here as well, I have not looked at these decks. I try to look at them cold and recreate what an investor says. So first we've got Crates, and this is from Sharif. And here's the title page. Crates, I'll read it. Health, automated savings platform unlocking billions in unrealized health, wellness savings. And then we got a little quote here. Millennials staying healthy, working PE. Crates completely transformed the way I use my HSA, saving $1,000 plus a year on my gym. Whoop. And supplements so easy to. Not sure if this testimonial, but Will, what's your first impression about this cover slide?
First things first. Who is this? Is this the founder that's there? That's a quote from somebody.
I don't know. That's the question.
Okay, fair enough. But first things first. Whoever did submit the deck, thanks. Right. To be fair, a whole bunch of people are going to see this. It's going to help a whole bunch of people out. It's brave for you to do it. Maybe selfishly, you just needed the help, and that's cool too. But I'm saying this message to all the other founders that submit a deck. It's a cool thing to do, right? It's appreciated, right? You submitting a deck, it's kind of putting yourself out there naked a little bit, but it is helping out a lot of other people, and we appreciate the fact that you do it. So I want to put that out there. First things first, having the tagline out there helps a ton. You got to remember, there are a lot of decks getting sent out there, and this is your first impression, but keep it simple. Putting that quote out there, the first thing, not the end of the world, but bear in mind, the person seeing this right now, Ed and I, and for all the folks listening to this, remember, we have no context. Think about yourself, all the folks watching this. At this very moment, you have no context for what this business is, and now the founders just introduced a testimonial, a quote, and you don't have the full context for what the business is. So the quote doesn't necessarily ring true yet. It's a little bit early to give the quote because you don't fully understand what the value of that quote is because you don't have the context of the business. As founders, this happens all the time. because we forget, because we've been thinking about this nonstop. We forget that our audience, the investors, et cetera, don't know the business the way we do. And this is going to permeate the entire deck. It happens throughout the whole deck. We miss all of these details throughout the deck that we forget to tell our audience because we already know them. And it happens over and over and over. And this is why you share your deck. You share it with strangers. You share it with fresh faces. You share it with people who've never seen it before because you'll see it on their face. You're like, and this is why it's awesome. And the person sitting across from you is like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And you're like, wow, now that you say that, that makes total sense. So my first point, it's simple. It's so obvious, when you hear it, is share it with strangers. It makes a huge lick of difference.
And right off the bat, as what Will said, you got your opportunity to make the first impression. And the first impression, I'm going to look at it and go, okay, well, it's designed. There's a logo. I can appreciate these things. It's professional. It's put together. But I'm either going to completely ignore that testimonial because it's irrelevant to me at that moment in time, and I don't have time. I literally have a few seconds that I'm going to be spending on this, or I'm going to read it and I'm going to be confused. And that's not the situation. Like, they say in professional fighting, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. Like, don't leave it in the minds of the investor to have to make this decision. But overall, I'm going to say, Will, I don't know what you think, but yeah, at least I know the direction that I'm heading, and I appreciate a tagline like this, right? Yep. So let's move into the next one. Oh, I saw a comment here. We got some regulars that are checking it out. And yeah, so if you want us to look at your pitch deck right now, let's do it right after. You didn't have to submit it beforehand. We usually have them loaded, ready for the show, but we will take a look at your pitch deck. So very courageous of you to put your pitch deck right in there. But let's take a look. Let's speed through this one then. We got HSAs equal most underutilized asset in health and personal finance. And then we got some facts, 35 million, billions, 3%. Will right away. This is the problem slide. At least it says problem in the upper right-hand corner from what I can see. What do you think about this?
Okay, so here's the challenge. I don't know where the focus should be. This happens all the time. Essentially what's happening right now is you've given me 3, maybe 4 different things to focus on. You just told me 35 million HSA account holders. You just told me billions of dollars on unrealized savings. And you just told me 3% of account holders. You just gave me 3 different thought paths. That's dangerous. Now, often when we're building the problem statement, we're thinking, well, more is better, right? Unfortunately, more is bad. All 3 of those paths confuse me because I don't know which one you want me to be on. What we're looking for is singularity. We want focus. Focus me on a single problem, a single path. Here's exactly where I want you to take me. I want you to open up with the exact person you're trying to focus on. In other words, I want you to say US consumers. I want you to say millennials. I want you to say moms. I want you to say exactly who you're opening up with. Ed, when you look at this, can you tell me, or does it resonate, who the customer is?
You presented multiple options. So right away, I don't know, are you trying to solve the problem for HSAs? First, I'm going to back up here. I don't know if this is an American thing, me being Canadian, please. We'll do better next time. I definitely will try. But what is an HSA? Is that actually a common term that every American investor, anybody would know?
I was going to go there next, okay? This is exactly what I was just talking about in the previous slide. The founder assumes that everyone knows what a health savings account is.
Gotcha.
Right? Now, this is because it's common to them. This happens all the time. But think about it. Ed, you're a smart guy that looks at pitch decks for a living, and you didn't instantly know what it is.
No idea.
Think about that for a moment. Think of what a massive miss that is for the founder, sending it to a highly educated person that does this for a living, and how quickly that missed right out of the gates. Now, for the entire rest of the deck, you're not on the same page. That person lost you by simply using the wrong terminology out of the gates. Time and time again, if you had to make a bet, you want to bet on the lowest common denominator terminology. You want to speak to your audience like they're 12 years old. Now, when people hear that, they're like, well, I don't want to sound pedestrian. I don't want to sound childish. That's not it. That is not it. You want to make sure you're speaking a common language that is just so simple to understand. I'll give you a good example where I saw this go haywire across the board. Crypto was the worst example of this. Ed, I'm sure you saw it a lot.
Okay.
Crypto
and I
went
invested in a lot of crypto, let me tell you.
over everyone's head in the first 5 words, like immediate jargon. And like, I never got that into crypto, but I knew some of it. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about? Right. Not to mention most of it made no sense to begin with. And I was like, no one understands what you're talking about. And so when we would look at the problem statement, the first thing we would say is it simple? Is it simple? And whenever you're using a term that's industry jargon, whenever you're using something that only somebody that knows it would know it, it fails. Let's go back to the slide, the problem slide. Problem statement slide is the single most important slide on the deck. It sets up the entire deck, the entire deck. When you look at the problem statement slide here, what problem do you take from it?
That's the next issue. So first, I'm like, what's an HSA? So let's just say I knew what an HSA was.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if the problem that I'm trying to take away is that HSAs are broken unto themselves. The people don't know how to use the HSAs, or if there's a bigger economic problem. The companies that participate in the HSAs, I'm all over the map, and that's what you said. You give me 3 paths to go down, and I'm completely confused.
You bet. Okay, so we're missing a couple of key fundamentals in the problem statement. The first thing that we didn't strictly pay attention to was who has the problem. Now technically, we said 35 million account holders. So we're somewhere in there. Okay, that's not too far off. Okay. We said that they've got billions of dollars in unrealized savings. Now that's actually the core of the problem. I bet when we get to the solution statement, that's what we're going to talk about. That there's some unrealized savings that can be tapped into, and we can do something of that. Because then we say 3% of account holders, only 3% of account holders understand the full benefits. So if I had to guess, and by the way, in the problem statement, you kind of don't want me to guess. A really good problem statement makes me go, oh, damn, I think I know exactly what the solution is because it sets me up so well.
Yeah.
A confusing problem statement is like, damn, dude, I don't even think I understand what this problem means. And it, again, happens all the time. Not a big deal.
Let's trace back. So let's explore a little bit. I just want to caveat this and a little public service announcement for everyone. No investor is going to spend all this time on this pitch deck like Will just did. We are not going to spend that time. It's like done next. We're doing this to help you. So don't take for granted that an investor does this. But for the sake of understanding and learning, let's look at this and let's trace back and see if we can make some connections or refine this just a little bit. Here's another problem slide. We'll talk about some founders send us and they got 3 problem slides. Like, what would you say to that?
You get 1. Here's the deal. We get 1 problem slide, and at most, we're allowed to have 2 sentences. Now, when people hear that, they hear, wait, whoa, I get 2 sentences. What are you talking about? Who says I only get 2 sentences? Here's why. Here's why you only get 2 sentences. Ed, you were just talking about this. You get 2 sentences because that is the maximum amount of attention that your slide is going to get. Here's what I think people think when they're building the deck. Again, Ed, you and I have gone through this as founders ourselves, so we had all the same kind of misconceptions of how this process goes. When we build our deck, we kind of assume that it's kind of like when we submitted a term paper to our professor, that it gets read and consumed and gets its due attention. It does not. It gets shuffled as fast as possible in a highly competitive way. So the way it gets consumed is I get 20 decks as an investor. I rifle through them as fast as possible. And if they're even a little bit off, I just cycle through the ones that are not off. So if you're the one that's all jumbled with a bunch of slides that make no sense, I just don't need to read it. I don't sit there and give you the benefit of the doubt because I'm paid to grade your paper. It's not a mortgage application. I don't have to spend time on it. I can just move on to the one that's not a jumbled mess, right? It's competitive with ones that are done well. So if yours is 5 sentences and it's complex and it requires a lot of thought, I just don't need to read it.
On top of which,
that's the challenge.
Yeah. On top of which, to compound your challenge there, I just talked to a founder, been a YC 2 times, raised over $150 million each venture. They're on like BCD rounds.
Yeah.
And $300 million in revenue. And he was explaining what Y Combinator looks for and the investors he talked to, what they look for in pitch decks. And he said concise shows that the founder is confident and doesn't need all those words and sends that signal to the investor, wow, this is a founder worth it. And his advice literally is break it down into the 1 slide, the 1 statement, and then cut that statement in half. That's how concise you have to be. That's what we're talking about. So slides like this, I'm going to meander around. It's got words that I don't understand. We're just adding to this mix of problems that we've talked about. Let's see if we can keep digging here a little bit. Now we get into the vision. Founders do this quite a bit. They get right into vision. Will, what do you say to this?
No one cares about your vision. I know when people hear this, so it's like heresy. What do you mean no one cares about my vision? Let me be more specific. Of course, at a high level, people care about your vision, okay? But this is a little bit different. I only care about the vision if I actually understand what the problem and solution are. For me to care about your vision, I need to understand specifically what the problem is and how you're solving it. If I don't understand that the problem is people can't find taxis and the solution is you've got an app that helps people find taxis, Uber, then only then can you tell me that you have a vision that you're going to transform transportation, et cetera, and maybe someday deliver food through this app, right? First, you need to convince me that the problem you're solving has merit and that it's a big market. Then you can go on to sell vision. You can't jump into vision until you've basically given me a cogent story that then supports that vision. Okay. Now, the tricky thing with a deck is the fact that 90% of the time, you're not there to present it. A lot of people don't think about that, right? 90% of the time, you're sending your deck there ahead of time and it's presenting without you because every investor is going to want to look at your deck before they see you. And if your deck is a jumbled mess that is only makes sense if you're there presenting it, well, most of the time, it's going to be viewed without you. And because nobody can make sense of it, you're never going to get a chance to actually present it, in which case it's kind of useless. So the deck has to be able to stand naked without you before you can get there.
And let me explain to you and everybody here literally what would happen when I was on the side of being a general partner at a fund and we had to make decisions on writing checks. We talked a lot about vision slides and founders asked us, shouldn't I be visionary? I got to change the world. And we would say, yes, but like Will said, I looked for vision by the end. At the end of it, if you're going to put vision anywhere, for me, it worked the best just as an investor at the end when you said, if we solve this problem and execute the way that I believe we will, this is how the world changed. And then we're going to go on to world domination. And there's always that tension. I'm not saying founders shouldn't be visionary, but there's an appropriate time to present that. And we want you to be visionary and we want you to think big and take big swings and go for those moonshots. But if you can't tell me how you're going to execute in the short term in a very focused way, it's like the beachhead. If you're going to lose the Battle of Normandy, right there on the beach, then who cares about the rest of the war, the vision for the world, et cetera? You've already lost. And that's what, Will, I think you're talking about.
Yeah. I got to tell you that the challenge with pitch deck advice is there's just so much of it. There are a million ways to build a pitch deck. What Ed and I will talk about is one of them, right? People have raised literally trillions of dollars without our help. So there's no version where this is the only way to do it. What we talk about is one way to do it. And it may work for you. It may not. Take our advice and incorporate it into how you do it. Some people will tell you, tell a story, right? That's what you want to do. And so we'll see some pitch decks that are like telling this long narrative story that requires a long presentation, et cetera. Have people raised money doing that? Yes. Do I think it's a great way to do it? Not really. I think it's a license to meander, right? And I think it gets people in a lot of trouble. I'm kind of a get to the point kind of guy. I think that tends to work very well.
And I think you bring up a great point, Will, and I want to reiterate this. Often, a lot of our advice is based upon first-time founders, early founders. You might as well learn your scales, learn to mix colors using the primary colors and the color wheel, like just focus on RGB before you get into like 32 million different colors, et cetera. And we want you to master the basics before you get creative. After that, man, I've seen pitch decks and the founder is so sophisticated, so mature, they can go into stories and it works. And I go, great. You're probably one out of like 500 that I will meet that can pull that right out of the hat right in the beginning. Here, we want to go, just like Will said, to the lowest common denominator and share with you the basic advice that everybody can implement that you can have immediate short-term success with, set you up for success, not failure with like complicated techniques. That's where we're coming from.
You bet. And it just works. That's the point. I've never seen an investor say, wow, this wasn't nearly as complex as I needed it to be. Right? Or boy, I really wish they told a longer, more complex story.
Yes, we have that experience. Now, Will, what I did was I just took a look. I see that we went into like more problem or why now state of today. I think that this was an attempt at a solution. So let's backtrack a little bit and say, okay, let's say this was the solution statement. Okay. What would be your response, your feedback on this one?
Okay, let me dig in. Crates is an automated savings platform putting HSA savings on autopilot for an HSA eligible expense. User behavior, CVS, local gym, Amazon. Okay, got it. Crates platform integrations with cards and accounts, telehealth, AI-powered Okay, right out of the gates, this slide requires a narrator. You have a lot of details here that an audience, the viewer, couldn't possibly fill in without someone explaining all of kind of the metadata that's required to understand what all those connections mean, okay? If the slide requires a narrator, the slide is broken, fundamentally. And that's what I just said a moment ago, where 90% of the time, the slide's going to have to stand naked, meaning someone's going to be viewing it, just like we are now, without you there to defend or present it, and that makes it a dangerous slide. Now, the one thing I do like is that at the top of the slide, this is vitally important, the author did attempt to create a single summary slide, a sentence rather, that defines what the slide intends to mean, right? However, we've got a graphic, a visual below it that doesn't have a lot of information for me to put the pieces together. If I don't know what that graphic is supposed to mean, I'm lost. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it seems like you smashed a how it works slide with a solution slide together. That's where I'm going. I'm totally lost because again, HSA now, I'm pretty financially savvy. I've worked in fintechs before, but this whole HSA thing, so I'm lost. I'm at a bit of disadvantage. But let's play this game. Will, you and I, we are the co-founders here of Crates. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to say, here's the problem. And you and I, we're brainstorming and we're like, oh, these are all the factors in our problem. And by the way, everyone, this is an easy fix in the sense that you can take all this data that you have on the slide, all your thoughts, send it to ChatGPT. I just had a founder send all his brainstorming, my brainstorming notes and sent it to Perplexity. I used ChatGPT and he came out with a problem statement. And you can say, give me a problem statement for an investor, for an early stage investor. This is my startup. Here's a pitch deck. I want it one sentence. I want it less than 30 words, etc. And you can even ask for a reaction. How would an investor react? Give me 3 options. What do you think is the best one based on the environment? But let's pretend, Will, that you and I, we are co-founders. And I'm like, okay, so you're in charge of the pitch deck. And I'm like, Will, 35 million HSA account holders. I give you all this data. And you kind of understand. We're just going to assume the solution is a solution. What would you do in terms of problem statement? Let's just wordsmith
You
something.
bet. Sure. First thing I'd say, Ed, is we're going to open up with who has the problem and how many dollars are at work. So I'm going to say for 35 million HSA account holders, we said billions of dollars. We're not going to use billions of dollars. We want the exact amount. Okay. So I'm going to say US because I want to be specific. I want to say what market I'm in. If this is US, right?
Okay.
For US HSA account holders, there are 152, I'm making this number up, $152 billion in unrealized savings.
Right.
That could be applied toward X, Y, and Z that are not.
Yes. Perfect.
For 35 million US HSA account holders, there are $152 billion in unrealized savings that could be applied to X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z are 3 categories of benefits that would be badass that are not being applied.
Okay. So you've demonstrated what we tell all the founders. I like to say you want to put size, scope, severity. You want to talk and really define what those numbers are, what the pain is, what the cost is if you don't solve that problem. Walk us through, Will, those factors that you just went through. You just did the mental exercise and demonstrated those principles.
Yeah, can you go over to that slide? I may be kind of murdering their value proposition, but let's pretend I'm not for a second.
Sure.
Can you go to the slide that was the one that we said was complicated, the vision that kind of looked like a solution, right? I'm going to go to the left there where it says user behavior, CVS, local gym, Amazon. And I'm going to pretend for a second that maybe those sources are places where they could apply their savings account. I don't know if this is true, because again, this is why I don't actually understand their problem or solution. But if somehow those cost centers, and I'm assuming because it's CVS, local gym, Amazon, those are places that are health related, and somehow I'm assuming the money that's otherwise being put in a savings account could be applied under those categories. I would say for common expenditures, like places at CVS or gym, or I'd probably be more specific to say prescriptions, exercise, or fitness, or whatever you'd consider Amazon to be for that category, could otherwise be expensed or saved. I would put those categories directly in the problem statement. Essentially, what I'm trying to tell an investor is like for 10% of what people spend every month, that could be directly deducted from their taxes, right? I would try to hard code that into the problem statement if that's really what I was trying to convey.
I want to just add to what Will said. We might have totally butchered it. Like this founder's out there, and I just realized the testimony on the front is not the founder. The founder, you might be out there going, you guys totally screwed it up. I can't believe you're doing this to my pitch deck. But you see, that's the problem. The fact that we even had to go there and do that is the issue that we are faced with. And so we're trying to make the best of it. You don't want to put your potential investor in that situation. That is a very bad idea. So we're just giving you the principles. So I'm going to say to this founder, we're going to send this founder feedback and say, watch this, go back. Everything falls down into problem, solution, market. If you are going to put all your upfront work and just get the feedback right out of the gate, I would rather have founders come to me and say, Ed, here's my problem, solution, and market, and not show me any of the rest of the deck. Just give me a black and white text-based deck and let me work with them so we can establish a foundation for the rest. We'll talk about problem, solution, market. Why are those slides the most important?
Yeah, well, look, this is exactly it. I mean, the fact that we're so dumbfounded we do this for a living is exactly it. The fact that we don't understand the problem, and for the viewers, because you just went through the same journey we did, the fact that we couldn't make it past the problem, let me ask you this. Does it matter who their competition is? Does it matter who their team is? Nope, because we don't even understand what problem it is.
Exactly.
The whole rest of the deck doesn't matter. The whole rest of the deck doesn't matter. We haven't looked at their financials. We haven't looked at the team, the traction. We haven't looked at anything because it doesn't matter. The rest of the deck is obsolete because we never figured out what their problem was. So we have no context for why any of it would matter. That's why the problem, solution, and market size are so critical to set up the rest of the deck, because it works in exactly this fashion. If I don't understand the problem, which you just saw how quickly that can happen, I can't see the value in the solution. If I don't see how the solution solves the problem, then I don't really care what size of a market you're in, because I don't understand why that solution is valuable. If I do understand why the solution is valuable, but I don't see why it's a big enough market that I would care, then I'm never going to invest in it no matter what the solution is anyway. If I really understand this problem, I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty interesting problem, this healthcare savings account thing. And I'm like, hey, that actually would be a really valuable solution. And you're like, hey, by the way, that's 152 billion with a B problem. I'm like, whoa, that's a big problem in a really good solution area. Until I check those three boxes, first three slides of the deck, I am not interested. But once I check those three boxes, now I'm paying attention to the rest of those slides. Now you got me hooked. I may still not invest, but I can tell you, if I don't check those first three boxes, I don't care what's on the rest of the deck. I don't care who's on your team. If it's a problem I don't care about, right? So I got to check those three first. Those are the three most important slides. And that's not to say the rest of the slides aren't important. I'm saying those are the go, no-go slides. Got to figure those out first.
And one of the best compliments that you're going to get from an investor, and we see this, we have a service out here, and it's our fundable accelerator, and we basically help you with the pitch deck. We send it out, and I get to see what the investors say. I literally get to read the investor responses based on pitch decks. We work with the founder, we create it. And one of the most encouraging piece of feedback that I get is they'll say, you know what? You have a fantastic idea. We get it. It's just not in our space. We're not ready to go there. At least you've gotten through and communicated. That to me is a great signal. So just as long as the investor gets it, then at least you can help them make that decision on whether you're playing in the same ballpark or not. And they will be kind. They'll respond to you. But if you do hit that investor and they realize, wow, you've nailed it, this is exactly what we're looking for, we're in this space, then you have such a better shot of nailing the rest of the pitch deck, even if it's not as much traction, it's not as good. If you can be clear on problem solution and you understand your market, wow, your life gets so much easier. All right. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send that feedback to the next founder. I'm going to put up, we just had a pitch deck sent to us by chat. Remember, if you have questions on anything, use the Q&A box. We will prioritize those. But I just want to say, I appreciate this founder. Amar, I hope I'm not butchering your name. Amar with Modgarden. You are agreeing that we are going to publicly take a look at your dev feedback, and this review is going to live forever on the YouTubes, on the internet. You know, everything lasts forever. Nothing is temporary. It is there. We're going to be super kind, super encouraging, because we want to reward your courage for doing this. All right, we got the go ahead. Okay, Will, here we go. Modgarden,
appreciate it, buddy.
Cover slide. Modgarden, reviving the food system from the brink of collapse. Your initial impression, response.
I like brink of collapse. You know what? Let me build on that a little bit. Right out of the gates, I don't like when people are over the top. I don't like being like overly hyperbolic. But I do like when people use some good, colorful language. And brink of collapse gives me some emotion. You know, I'm a former ad guy, right? I spent 10 years, my first company was an agency. And I spent a lot of time with a lot of words. And I like when we talk about bringing the food system from the brink of collapse. That draws me in. I'm a big fan of words, and I think strong use of words there matters. And I think on pitch deck, word choice matters, and I think that's a great opener. I'm a big fan.
Let me give some contrarian advice, just to even it out here. When it's done right, I totally agree. When it's done well. But when, I think Will mentioned it, when it's so hyperbolic, I would prefer the founder just get to the point and say, we're a SaaS platform that helps people get food in food deserts. Something like that, right? Now, if you can combine the two, I've seen it done really well, where they explain exactly what it is so I know where I'm going, and they add some of that marketing flair. Then I'm like, ooh, it's like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, just right. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, Ed, here's what I'd say. I would say if Marc said, hey, you got two choices. Matter of fact, this is what we do. We're Uber for pizza. or visionary, this is bringing the world back from collapse, I'd take Uber for pizza every day. Like, this is what we do. If he were to say, yeah, but I think the emotional thing is what sells it, then I'd say, go with that. But
Yes.
I'd agree. My default would be just say what you do. But if there was something strong with the emotional tide, and that'd have to be a unique case, then I'd go with the emotional tide. But I agree with you.
Yeah, sometimes it works. It just work with your strengths, test it out. Okay, so I was sick while on Wall Street. While pushing financial success, my health fell. I turned to food grown in pure soil and got better. Happy for you. Congratulations. Will, this is your first slide.
Okay. I mean, it is the opening of a problem slide. It does bring in emotion. It's funny because that's the way I look in the morning, and that's the way I look about lunchtime, like every single day. So I know that comparison well. But one of the things I want to point out, I'm a big fan, like I said a moment ago, of drawing in emotion. This is going to feel like it's opening up storytelling, which I said earlier can get dangerous, because if this story runs too long, it's going to make me say, oh shit, is going to get to the point. Now, again, I'm reserving judgment, right? We're going to get into the deck. We'll find out in a minute if it runs too long. But, so far.
A little pro tip for everyone. This slide, I'm going to point this out again. I love this slide. I love it. Here's how I would use a slide like this. If I was pitching live, I'd actually blow up those pictures and have it one after the other. If I was pitching, I would start with this, and I would say, because it makes the investor empathize with you and helps you demonstrate that you've empathized with the user. If you have a personal itch, you're scratching your own itch, like you had this problem. So if I was pitching live, and this is where, Amar, I want you to maintain your flair. Don't lose your flair. We're not trying to strip it out of you. Just put it in the right spot. I'd open up, and if I was like on the Y Combinator demo day stage, I would literally put this slide. This is me in 2000, and I was experiencing this, this, and this, right? I wouldn't even have any words. I'd have, 2000. And then I would put up the second image, say, this is me now, and here's what I learned, and here's why I'm here with this startup. That would be such a powerful story, but no narrator.
But if you're presenting.
Yeah, if you're presenting.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so next looks like this is, I think it's the problem slide. Chemicals companies are growing our food. So we got some.
Let's pause there for a second, Ed.
Yeah.
We got to talk about naming the slides. Super important. All right, let me give my little speech. Guys, every single slide has to have the name of the slide, problem, solution, market size, etc., in the top left, top right, if you want to go crazy, of the slide, okay? Without that, we don't have the context of the slide, which is a massive issue. The example I would give you, it's like walking into a grocery store where there's no names at the top of any of the aisles, and they're like, go find shit, right?
Yeah.
You've got to put it up there. Otherwise, again, you just saw it. It's like, wait, I don't know what slide this is. Huge issue. It's the easiest fix in the world. It's also kind of like a super junior mistake. Like when you see lots of decks, you can immediately spot a startup that doesn't have their stuff together when they don't have that in there, because any startups that's sent this out to enough investors will quickly get reprimanded that it's not in there, and then it'll come back. So it's usually kind of like an easy thing to fix. But moving on. If that's the problem slide, and Marc, tell us if it is in the chat, then let's dig in.
Let me add just a quick little note to what Will said. And I'm taking this chance to sort of talk to some of my trolls and my haters out there, because I've been flamed on the internet, and people have said, no, Ed, you shouldn't give that advice because the slide, the headline should work on itself. If I need the word problem to know that this is the problem statement, then, blah, 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 blah. And to my detractors, I say, one, I don't think you've ever sat on my side of the table and had to look at like 30 pitch decks in a day. One.
Try it for one day.
Second is that you're taking for granted that people know how to give a good, problem statement and to make it so good. The chances of that happening are so slim. And so you are helping me make some decisions. You are helping me go through this pitch deck. So you're talking about from Will, the standpoint that he was giving is this is a junior mistake for founders, but you're also doing it to help the investor. And I just public service announcement.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the cost of putting in there is zero. The cost to not doing it is massive. Why bother, right?
Exactly. Why take the risk? Okay, so confirmation. This is the problem slide. We got 3 columns going on right here. I kind of know where this feedback's going to go. I'll just read the headlines. We got chemicals companies are growing our food. Strain on food supply, centralized risk. Modern farming has reduced nutrients by 90%. I'm doing it this way because that's literally what I do. I'll read the big bolded text first. I'm not going to read the rest of it. I'm just going to be straightforward, just be very direct. I don't like to read all the little mini tiny bullets. But Will, what are your thoughts?
What I'm going to do, and again, I don't want Amar to chime in here because the whole point of these reviews are for the decks to stand on their own. The
Exactly.
goal here, the goal of the review is for the deck to stand on its own and not let it be defended. And that's how we make these changes. The key with the problem slide is to isolate the problem to specifically what we can solve. We get into a lot of dangerous spots when there's anything on the problem statement for things that we cannot solve for. I'll give you an example. The most common problem statement that I get is something along the lines of global warming is a huge problem, right? Again, a lot of things map back. Well, that's wrong. I mean, global warming is a huge problem. But as a problem statement, you're not allowed to put that on there because you can't solve global warming. You'd be like, well, that's not true. I have a solar panel. It's 40% more efficient. Awesome. Then you can solve the efficiency of a solar panel problem, but you're not going to solve all of global warming. You will not remove, freak hurricanes because you have a more efficient solar panel, right? Yeah. Like you have to focus the problem statement on specifically what you can solve for. This happens all the time. So let's go back to that slide. This is where I'll notice this immediately. The first thing I'll see is chemical companies are growing our food. Okay, and the first thing I'll think is, cool. Are you going to eliminate chemical companies from growing our food? And again, I know that's not true, right? And I know that's not the case. But that's immediately where I'm going to say, okay, well, I know you're not going to do this. So I already know that's not really the core problem that you're solving. But, we'll get there. Strain on our food supply and centralization risk. I'm like, cool. When we use your product, will there no longer be a food supply and centralization risk? Probably not, right? And I'm like, okay, well, then that's definitely not the problem that you will solve, right? Modern farming has reduced nutrients by 90%. When we start using your product, will all modern farming cease to reduce? You see what I'm saying? Like when we start to stack our problem statement with macro problems, we reduce our ability to solve those problems. So what happens is we have to distill this problem into the part that we can solve for. Otherwise, we create a problem that we don't solve, in which case, when we introduce our solution, it kind of falls flat. And so what I want to do is I want to pause in this because there's some other things I want to get to, but I want to jump to the solution so that I can start to map this back. Can we jump over there?
Jump to the solution. Here we go. Okay, so we've got more data. I think this is pointing out the problem. Our produce, yes, is the purest and most accessible option out there. So I think this is the value proposition.
Goes with organic greens with our soil-based vertical farms. Okay, dig it. Our soil is curated to restore the natural nutrient balance using regeneratively sourced ingredients. Okay, let me think for a second.
Let me just take a look. Okay, so it's hardware. Looks like a system. It's a farming system, right there. Actually, this is where let's just get some feedback. And before we go into this, remember, Amar, everybody, you are not going to be looking over the shoulder. You're not going to be in the room with the investor.
Hard. It's so you're like,
I'm literally looking at this pitch deck moving from a plane. Like I had to travel back and forth from China back and forth like 15 hours. I saved all my pitch decks and different things like that. I'm literally just looking at it, scanning it while I'm walking through. I'm just trying to squeeze it in. You are not there talking to me. But Amar, I just want you to put in one sentence into the chat and explain what your solution is. It's a system. It's a bunch of cabinets that grow food better than everybody else. Help us out so we can help you, because this is going to be important. I think we can be a lot more efficient. But Will, while we wait for this sentence, talk to us about why founders shouldn't try and solve like 300 problems at once, even though they all fall into the same category. Why are we picking one?
Yeah. Okay. So I want you to think about it in a couple different ways, because I think what we get anxious about, all of us, we all go about the same way. What we get anxious about is that if we don't convince the investor in this slide that our problem is massive and it can cover every possible use case, that they won't get it. And then if we cover too small of a problem, then we'll never get to tell them the big vision of what we can do, right? Let me give you an example. Ed, let's say you and I had invented the personal computer, right? And I'm like, hey, dude, let's just tell the investor that this thing will be able to replace a typewriter and that people will be able to produce documents better. And you're like, whoa. This thing will be able to do a million more things than that, right? And here's all the use cases. And I'm like, yeah, but they'll understand the word processor part right now. Like that typewriter thing, like will make us gazillions of dollars. It'll be easy to understand. And once they understand that, then we can explain how then we'll be able to do other types of word processing or other types of documents like spreadsheets, et cetera, and then gaming and all these other things. But until we can explain to them the simplicity of one thing, we'll never get an opportunity to explain more, right? Kind of land and expand, right? Founders come in and they're like, no, we have to explain the entire thing, like everything. The reason that fails time and time again is because no one has the capacity to digest that much. So what we have to do is find a starting place with our problem with the investor. You kind of a beachhead to say, here's a problem that we can solve now. Later in the document, either with our market size, our product roadmap, we can talk about how it expands to other things, right? But what we want to start with is where will we be the most focused now? We want to narrow it down a bit. Now, the second thing we want to do is we want to take all of these problems that we solve for and we want to stack rank them. We want to say, okay, our product solves like 10 things. Awesome. You get to pick 2. In this problem statement, on this slide, you get to pick 2, right? You list 10, rank them on which is the most important. Here's why. Number 1, most people won't remember more than 2, right? So listing 10 does you no good. If you can't solve the most important thing you do well enough for an investor to care, does it really matter that you do 9 more? No.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the investor isn't like, well, yeah, you don't do the first thing that great, but it's really cool that you do 9 more. They don't care. So what we're trying to do is say, here's the problem, and we solve the most important thing really well. If you even care that we do more things, awesome. But what the investor wants to know is that you do the most important thing better than anybody. So we want to stay focused.
Okay. So while Will was explaining that, just going back and forth with Marc, so there's still some confusion because trying to articulate, I ask for one sentence, and I do this all the time. I say, what's the one sentence of your solution? And I'm going to go to this slide because, I was still a little confused. Oops, let's go back here. So it looks like the solution is this hardware in this system that gets leased out to businesses to grow this type of stuff. Okay, Will, so we're going to go with that. That's the solution. So if you had to go all the way back to, let's start with the problem. What would you say in terms of direction that Amar should be looking at to improve this deck for the next time around?
Well, first off, I mean, looking at the photos and the screenshots, the first thing I saw is, hey, that thing's pretty small. So the first thing that came to mind wasn't farming. I'm like, farms are massive with a voluminous amount of food like that. That's not, I live in Ohio, I live farms everywhere. They're producing a lot more food than that. That seems like something a lot more focused. And then in the chat, Marc said, we're helping urbanites access the purest food within steps of where they lived. That's way different than the massive farms that I live near, right? So I'm thinking that this is something a lot more focused, right? In other words, a smaller crop, if you will, right? A smaller harvest, right? And so if that were the case, and again, I may be murdering the vision of the product, and I apologize if I am. If that were the case, I would dial that into the problem statement. I would say for consumers that are highly concerned about health, we allow them to create a personal farm that dials in the nutrients and the things that they need that caters to exactly what's important to them in a way they couldn't possibly do because the farm system isn't accessible to them, right? It allows them to create a farm system unto themselves, right? But I would create a problem statement that would say, in order to get that level of hyper-local farming, you have to be in Ohio and have your own farm, right? Short of that, if you live in New York City, you'd have to have this. In other words, and again, I'm half kidding with some of this. What I'm saying is there's something about the form factor of this farming unit that's unique that I think should be dialed into the problem statement much more specifically. That I think the problem statement is
we are out of time.
A really cool product.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. We're out of time, so I'm going to leave the last word for Will. But Amar, I look at this and I'm like, that's really cool. Like I looked at the pictures, I immediately felt the design, everything like that. So what I'm going to do is give you the ultimate solution for this. This is going to solve all your problems with your pitch deck. Go to Pitch Deck Doctor with Will Schroter. Okay, just go. Yep. Go take his course. Go to you're part of Startups.com. And this is for everybody who's going to be watching this. We do this weekly, actually bi-weekly. Will is walking through and then he's teaching about funding on the other off weeks. And you will get literal hand-holding for Will. Will, give us a little shout-out. Talk about why people need to come and have their pitch decks worked on with you in your workshop.
Well, first off, let me say this, Amar, because you were kind enough and brave enough to do that. Ed, if you can get us connected, Amar, I'm going to get on the phone with you. I'm going to go over your deck with you one-on-one if you're willing to take the time, and I'll dig in with you and dial this in with you. I think this is an awesome idea. It's an awesome product. You took the time, which I do appreciate for doing this. I'll take the time with you. We'll get this thing dialed in, and we'll get it up to speed. If you're down, I'm into it. And so, Ed, if you can help me coordinate that with Amar, happy to do it.
100% will do.
That said, but for everybody else that's listening, this gets recorded and published to YouTube and everywhere else. Every week we have this session. We go through this. I get on the phone with folks. I get on Slack with folks. We dig in and have exactly these conversations. So if you guys want to do this with us, if you want to have these conversations, if you want to be brave enough to share your decks, hop online. And that said, we've done this a million times. So what we did is we just took every single one of these slides and we distill word by word, sentence by sentence, exactly what you're supposed to write. So like when Amar's going through this, he doesn't have to guess what to write on every slide. We tell you exactly what to write on every slide. You don't have to like download a template and try to figure out how to rewrite words. You just don't need to do it. All been done before. Just go on site. Let us just figure it out for you. We'll just give you the answers to the test.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for this show. Thanks everyone for participating. Always appreciate everyone coming and dropping by. We didn't get to hit every question and answer everything or go through all the content, but that's the best part. We're going to do it again next week. I'm going to keep twisting Will's rubber arm to come join us every single time. Appreciate you all. We are here every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We got some great guests that are coming up this week. Everything talking about hiring, talking about video editing and the future of that and all the products. And the best part is these are founders helping other founders, helping you with their experiences. That's what our community is about. Check us out at Startups.com. Once again, thanks everyone. Will, pleasure as always. See you next time. See you everyone.
Guys.